try this again. We're going to try not to do quite as fast we did this morning. We're going to start out tonight with a song, Shout to the Lord. It's contemporary, a little bit different music, but it's a very pretty song, and I've given y'all the words. I hope you have it. So we're going to try.
Brother Bud, would you open us up in prayer?
Our gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you tonight just as Lord, thanking you, Lord, for this Sunday night service, Lord, that we could come, Lord. Lord, that we might just enjoy your sight
to see each and one of you here tonight, and I thank you, Lynn, for starting us out here. I know it's a new song, but it's a pretty song, and it's a song that uplifts our Savior and Lord there, and I think that'd be one that we'll get to know familiar there. Georgia Baptist Children's Home, Mallory Baptist Association is doing truck loading here for the month of August, and the children's home is in need of laundry detergent, household cleaners, paper products, and disposable plates, cups, and bowls. And if you want to give gift cards, you can. Back behind here by the water fountain, I did bring the black tub tonight, so it's back there, so we can fill it up there. Let's make month of August our mission endeavor here, and let's support the Georgia Baptist Children's Home here. Let's fill it up, and I'll take it over there to bind on September 10th there with that as well there. Any other announcements that need to make here? Pray for the deacons. They're trimming the hedges around here. If you didn't notice, they're starting to look better. Keep praying for them. They're going to be working through the hot weather here with that. Wallace doesn't sweat, but Brother Bud does, and so pray that they don't fall out here. But appreciate the men coming and take care of that and helping us out and making the place look good around here. All right, well, Lynn, continues to lead us in worship here.
The next song is "It Is Well With My Soul," page 14. 410.
When peace
That's one of my favorite hymns growing up as a youth in church, and when I joined the church choir in 11th grade, I really enjoyed learning the bass part on that song. And then when I went to Bible college, I sang in college choir, and then I learned the dynamics and how to build up to that last verse with that. And you know, we all sound pretty good on that. You ladies sound good on the choir, and you guys joined right in on the echo there. It sounded pretty good there. And what makes the powerful song is the story behind that song. If you don't know the story behind that hymn, it was written by Horatio G. Spafford. He was an successful attorney and held an extensive real estate investment. And Horatio was married to his wife Anna, and they had 4 daughters. And Horatio was a good friend of D.L. Moody and supported his ministry. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire consumed Horatio's real estate. And after 2 years, while D.L. Moody was preaching in Great Britain, he thought it would be good to take his family on a vacation there. Due to business matter, Horatio sent his wife and 4 daughters ahead, and he would join them later. His wife and 4 daughters set sail across Atlantic Ocean on the SS Villa del Harbor. They never made it to Europe because the vessel collided with another vessel, and in 12 minutes the ship sank. Anna lost her 4 daughters. She struggled or tried to hang on to them, but lost her grip. And she lost her 4 daughters. She was the only one that survived. And she sent a telegram to Horatio, 2 words: saved alone. Immediately, Horatio boarded the next ship to Europe to join his wife. And while crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the captain of the ship alerted Horatio where the ship went down with the 4 daughters. Horatio went back to his cabin and penned the words, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea pillows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul."
Amen.
Only somebody who has a relationship with Jesus Christ could write those words. His devotion to God, that he was able to write those words or pen those words. Horatio Spafford had no idea in those moments of grief and sorrow how God would use what he had written to help the generations who have come behind him to praise the Lord for peace that passes understanding, even in the deepest pain. Anna Spafford's telegram message, saved alone. How difficult it must have been for her to send that message. And that's where we find in Esther chapter 8 tonight. We find ourselves wondering whether saved alone will be all that Esther could say as well. Will she have to report, "I was rescued, but not the rest of my people"? We will see in Esther 8 that saved alone is certainly not what she wants to say, even though Haman is dead, but his decrees are still the law. They still got to deal with that. And when we left off a couple weeks ago, Haman was directed by King Ahasuerus to hang him on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. Haman's gone off the scene, but that decree is still there. They still got to deal with that decree that Haman made there. So Esther still has some unfinished business yet to save her people from extermination. Haman is dead, but his murderous edict was very much alive. And long after wicked people are gone, the consequences of their evil words and deeds live on. Even today, innocent people are suffering because of guilty people who lie in their graves. Esther has to intervene because in 9 months, the Persians would attack the Jews and wipe them off the face of the earth. And so tonight, the Lord has brought Esther and Mordecai to the kingdom for such a time as this. This is all of God's purpose and all God's plan, that he brought Esther and Mordecai for such a time as this. And now they are prepared to act. Now for the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says. So number 1, the rewards and promotion in verses 1 and 2 in chapter 8 here. That same day, King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed their relationship to Mordecai. The king removed his signet ring he had removed from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate here. And so we find here that Esther is rewarded here. The king is true to his word. Whenever Esther came in the presence of King Ahasuerus, King Ahasuerus always said, Esther, whatever you want, you get, I'll give even half the kingdom is yours. She could get anything she wanted. All she had to do was ask, and the king was going to give it to her. And so Esther's going to see if the king's going to live up to his words again here. And so the king was true to his word. Whatever she wanted, she got half the king. And the king gives her Haman's estate. So she's in control of Haman's estate here. That includes his property, the slaves, the servants, bank accounts, even the family. She is over that. She gets all that. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, the sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. You know, sometimes we wonder, why is the sinners all the time making out? Why they get it? Their day's coming. And God rewards the righteous here. And that's what we find here, that God is rewarding Esther and Mordecai here. Mordecai is promoted. The king made him the prime minister. He took Haman's spot. Haman was the one that despised Mordecai. And now Mordecai is in his position now. And King Ahasuerus gives him the signet ring to Mordecai as confirmation to him for getting the job done as prime minister. That signet ring is going to be very important here, that we're going to see. We're going to see here why that's important here, because that's the same signet ring that Haman wrote that decree to exterminate the Jews. This ring, Mordecai, in a few moments we're going to see, is going to write a new decree. And so the king recovered it from Haman. The king now knows the relationship between Esther and Mordecai. They are cousins and they are Jews. Esther gave the management of Hannah's estate to Mordecai, whom Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman, and now Mordecai has Haman's position and his estate. Psalms chapter 37, verses 34 through 36 says, "Wait for the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. You will watch when the wicked are destroyed. I have seen the wicked, violent person well-rooted like a flourishing native tree. Then I passed by and noticed he was gone. I searched for him, and he could not be found. The Lord will take care of the wicked." And so many times we wonder, why are the wicked getting away with it? I remember back in when I was working for Hudson Foods in Henderson, Kentucky, and we had this particular shift manager, he would never come in on time. In fact, he would come in about an hour before the first shift manager would come in. And so he would come in and he would talk to certain people to get to know what happened through the shift there. So he had his people that would tell him things. But he acted like when the plant manager came in that he'd been there all night and everything. And some of the supervisors were like, that's not right. We need a report. We need to do this. And I said, no. I said, his time is coming. I said, one day something's going to happen and they're going to ask, where is he? And that day did come. A day come, something happened in the plant and he wasn't there, and the plant manager showed up and said, where is he? He asked me. I looked at my watch and I said, oh, he won't be here till about 4 o'clock in the morning. Kind of looked at me. Said, yeah, that's about the time when he comes to work is 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what a shift is. I kind of acted dumb with him and saying that I don't know what his shift is or anything, but that's normally when he comes in. He scratched his head. Well, next week, he was moved to day shift, and the day shift manager was moved to night shift so that they could watch this guy to see whether or not he could be trustworthy again. And that's why I say, don't jump to conclusion. Their time is coming. Just like Haman. He was on a short leash and he didn't know that. And the wicked people are that way. And so their day is coming. And we just need to wait on the Lord and let him deal with those. And Mordecai certainly did. And now he is promoted to Haman's job. Number 2, Esther's petition here. Esther's petition here, verses 3 and 6. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet and wept and begged him to revoke the evil of Haman the Agagite and his plot that he had devised against the Jews. The king extended his golden scepter towards Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. And she said, if it pleases the king, I have found favor before him. If the matter seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let the royal edict be written. Let it revoke the documents by scheming Haman, the son of the Agagite, who wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's providence. For how could I bear to see the disaster that will come on my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? Again, how you approach a situation and how you address an issue determines by your conduct and how you say it. Again, Esther uses the appropriate way. Yes, she used her beauty because that's what got the king's attention. And she used it to her favor to get the king's attention here. And so Esther used perseverance here. She did not want to be saved alone. Despite the relief she must have felt when Haman was hanged, and even some measure of benediction when she received the possession. But she remembered her people, and the decrees had to be edited, and that still was not good enough. Even though Haman's dead, but there was still this decree that had to be dealt with. And so she goes before the king with this. And so we find that she was passionate. She fell at the king's feet and wept. She was passionate there. She was weeping, not for her own soul, but for the people's sake, her own people. Her burden for her people could not be hidden, and she made no attempt to conceal it. Esther fell before the king's feet, and her tears saturated his feet. Her full depth of emotion was on display for the king to see here. We do the same thing when we come before God in prayer. Have you ever been in those situations where you didn't know which way to turn, and the only way to turn was to fall on your knees and pray before God and give it to Him, and you weep deeply for the burden that you wept before God? God does not want us to conceal our emotions. He wants to see our broken hearts when we come before Him. He wants to see our emotions here. He wants to see our broken hearts and tears. And that's what Esther's doing here. And third here, she pleaded her case before the king. She pleaded here. Notice what she says here. Begged him to revoke the evil of Haman and his plot he had devised against the Jews here. Oh, king, we got to do something about this. And she literally begging King Ahasuerus to intercede and stop this genocidal plan here. And King Ahasuerus, he extends his golden scepter and allows Esther to stand and make her request known. But how would King Ahasuerus respond? How would he respond to this here? Well, we find number 3, the king's proclamation in verses 7 through 14 here. King Ahasuerus said to Esther, the queen, and to Mordecai, the Jew, look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hung on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Written in the king's name, whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and sealed it with a royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked. And on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything written exactly as Mordecai commanded for the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, the officials of 127 provinces from India to Kush. The edit was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote to King Ahasuerus' name, and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring. And he sent the document by mounted couriers who rode fast horses and bred in the royal stables. The king's edict gave the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possession as spoils of war. This would take place on the single day throughout all the province of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. A copy of the next issue issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all peoples so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against their enemies on that day. The couriers rode out in haste on the royal horses at the king's urgent command. The law also issued in the fortress of Susa. The problem with Esther and Mordecai faced was that the king simply by executive decree could not cancel the first edit, since the laws of the Medes and Persians were unalterable. He could not cancel that. He could not rule that out. In modern day democratic nations, legislation could reverse decisions, revoke laws. The Supreme Court of the land could even declare laws unconstitutional. But not so in the ancient rule of the Persian Empire. The voice of the king was the law of the land, and the king could do no wrong. And so the king couldn't legally revoke this edict, but he could issue a new decree that would favor the Jews. And that's what he told Mordecai to do here. I can't revoke this, But you could write a new decree to revoke this. And the new decree would let everybody in the empire know that the king wanted his people to have a different attitude towards the Jews and look favorably upon them. The citizens didn't have to hire a lawyer to explain the new etiquette to them. It was written in plain language, layman's terms that they could understand, and you could be sure they got the message. The message was, don't attack the Jews on March 7th. Don't attack the Jews on March 7th. Since Mordecai was now the prime minister, it was his job to draft the new decree here. And what he did was give Jews permission to defend themselves against anybody who tried to kill them and even take their property. And there were many people in the empire that were just like Haman. Well, yeah, they were. They hated the Jews too, just like Haman did. And wanted to destroy them and get their hands on their wealth. The new decree allowed the Jews to assemble and defend themselves, but they were not allowed to be the aggressors. And Mordecai says, you're not allowed to go out there and annihilate them. But if they come against you, you have a right to defend yourself. That's what he was giving them permission to do. And Mordecai's decree was in complete harmony with God's covenant with Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. Isaac also had agreed with Mordecai when Isaac blessed Jacob, when he said in Genesis chapter 27, verse 29, cursed be everyone who curses you, and bless those who bless you. In addition, God promised Moses in Exodus chapter 23, verse 22, I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. Dr. J. Vernon McGee said, the Jews had attended the funeral of every one of the nations that tried to exterminate him. They did. They witnessed every one of those that tried to exterminate the Jews. So number 4 here, the Jews are rejoicing. They're rejoicing here in verses 15 and 17. Mordecai went from the king's presence, clothed in royal purple and white, with a great royal crown and a purple robe of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and every city, everywhere the king's command and his law reached, and joy and rejoicing took place among the Jews. There was a celebration and a holiday, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because the fear of the Jews had overcome them. The statement of verse 17 is key to how the Persians accepted the new decree and sparing the Jews. Then many of the people of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews fell upon them. They recognized the Lord God Almighty, the God of Israel, the God of their Jews was more powerful than anything they ever seen here. They realized the power of God here. And many of the Gentiles in the empire sided with the Jews and acted as though they were Jews. They weren't ashamed to identify with the Jews, even though the Jews had enemies. They were proud to be with the Jews that day. You know, when President Reagan was assassinated and he was shot, and when he was being prepped for surgery, he jokingly, as you remember Ronald Reagan, he always joked and made light of things. I guess that was one of his candor of being a president, was his demeanor and willing to how to speak to people and everything. And he jokingly said to the medical team, "I hope all of you are Republicans." And one of the doctors replied, "Mr. President, today all of us are Republicans." And that's the attitude of many of the people in the Persian Empire when Mordecai's edict was published. Today, all of us are Jews. Well, in conclusion here, the book of Esther opens with the Jews keeping a very low profile. So much so that Esther and Mordecai wouldn't even profess their nationality. But now the Jews are proud of their race and so happy with what God has done that they are attracting others to their faith. Even the pagan Gentiles could see that God was caring for his people in a remarkable way. Evangelist Billy Sunday said, "If you have no joy in your religion, there is a leak in your Christianity somewheres." There's a leak. We should be the most joyous people on earth, even in the midst of what Horatio Spafford went through. Even in that, he still had joy and peace in losing his 4 daughters. We still have that joy. We still have that hope. We still have that peace. Do people see our Christianity? And if you don't have any joy in your Christianity, then there's a leak somewhere, and you need to find out what it is, and you need to put a patch on it and get it sealed. If Christian believers would manifest more joy of the Lord, and perhaps those outside the faith would be attracted to the church and be willing to consider the message of the gospel. You know, do people, like I said this morning, the Christ likeness, do people see Christ in us? The more we know about Christ, the more we talk about Christ, the more people are going to be attracted to us and attracted to Christianity here. And that's why James said in this is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 and 16. Christians are to be salt and light. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world, a city situated on a hill and cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Esther and Mordecai did that. Do people see Christ in your life? Does Christ shine through you? Are you ashamed to be a Christian? I hope not. If there is, there's a leak in your Christianity somewheres, and we need to find a patch. Let's stand as we prepare for the invitation here as Lynn comes forward and leads us in a verse of invitation here. But you know, God is faithful to his people, and sometimes we don't know how things are going to work out. But we are to be faithful. And he works those things out. And he works through people. And in the end, he shows himself real. And in the end, we are to glorify him and give him honor and glory. And that's what the people were doing here. The Jews were rejoicing and celebrating. But not only that, they were contagious to the Gentiles. We are to be that way. We are to be contagious with our Christianity. Father, have your way in this message and this invitation here, that we are to be salt and light in this world, Lord. More important, that we are to be a light to those in a dark world, Lord. Lord, may our light shine bright before those. We ask these things in Christ's name.